You're listening to Win the Day with James Whittaker.
What we do in life echoes in eternity.
Broadcasting from Los Angeles, California, here's your host, James Whittaker.
Let's go.
Welcome to episode 26 of Win the Day. And today we've got some big news on multiple fronts. This represents what will be the biggest change since we first started this show in 2019. Now, I believe we can learn from everyone. And in my line of work, I'm so grateful to have interviewed hundreds of people to learn more about their amazing journeys. If you've read my last book, Think and Grow Rich, The Legacy, you'll remember that the inspiration in the book came from real stories. So you could get a real blueprint to apply in your own life. And stories are also far more engaging and easier to remember too. It's like the opposite of a textbook. So from now on, literally starting with this episode, I've decided to spice things up. Drumroll, the Win the Day show is now going to start including interviews. There's a lot of inspiring people out there with incredible stories who have got so much expertise and experience to help all of you who are listening to the podcast or watching on YouTube, which includes me too, because I love learning from these people. And we're kicking off with one hell of a show today, as you'll see. Before we get started, I have another big announcement. For the last 2 months, while COVID-19 was taking over the world, I've been extremely busy working behind the scenes to create something that would help professionals and entrepreneurs take control of their life. I mean, this year will likely go down as the worst year our generation ever faces. So to help people get their lives back on track, I've partnered up with a good mate of mine and we've launched a virtual event, We Are Podcast House Sessions. We Are Podcast House Sessions. Since we're all stuck in our homes, we decided to get our friends, who are some of the biggest names in podcasting and entrepreneurship, to give you everything you need to take the reins of your life once more. Over 3 days, more than 50 experts will be giving you their exact strategies to succeed. They're not holding anything back. All their secrets will be yours. How they launched their own podcast, how they got guests, how they made their shows profitable from day one, how they built a huge business around it, how they leveraged podcasting to become the authority in their respective industries, and a whole bunch more. This is the world's first multi-day, multi-stream, multi-speaker virtual conference for podcasters. If you've got a podcast and want to take it to a whole other level, or if you've ever thought about launching a podcast and want it to be awesome and profitable from day one, this is the event for you. We've got companies like Success Magazine and VaynerMedia as partners. And seriously, you need to go to the event page to check out the speakers. We've got Jordan Harbinger, whose podcast gets 6 million downloads a month. We've got multiple 4-time New York Times bestselling authors. We've got award-winning CEOs, you name it. Tickets are less than $200 for 3 days with these superstars to work on your life and on your business. We want this to be the best event you've ever attended, period. Not the best virtual event, the best event overall. So don't miss this. To grab your ticket, go to wearepodcast.com. I'll also include a link in the show notes. wearepodcast.com. It will change your life, guaranteed. wearepodcast.com. All right, let's get into episode 26. I'm really excited about the first official guest we've ever had on the show, Michael Fox. He's a super successful, extremely well-connected dude, but what I love most about him is how down-to-earth and humble he is. 11 years ago, Michael and his 2 partners, one being his wife at the time, recognized that the future of retail was in personalization and customization, where shoppers could start creating the products they wanted rather than buying the generic ones that everybody else bought. The niche they found was women who wanted to customize their own shoes. Now, I've got a wife, a mum, and a sister, and they all love shoes, so this certainly sounded like a phenomenal concept from day one. So in 2009, Michael and his 2 partners launched Shoes of Prey. For the first time, women around the world were able to order shoes online that they had designed themselves. They were manufactured to their specifications, delivered to them quickly, and at a very competitive price. In the years after, their business raised more than $25 million and had partnered with companies like retail giant Nordstrom. Michael was on top of the world. Then it all came crashing down. In this interview, we talk about Michael's roller coaster entrepreneurial journey that's taken him from his home country, Australia, to Asia, America, and Europe, and then back to Australia, and what lessons he learned along the way. We'll also talk about the impact on his personal relationships and what happened that made 2019, literally the next year after his business collapsed, the best year of his life. There's so much in this episode: how to start a business, how to raise money, how to be happy, how to respond to criticism, how to dust yourself off from failure, and how to partner with some of the most accomplished people on the planet. This one will blow you away. We'll also talk about Michael's new business, Fable Food Co, that's attracting huge attention around the world with its high-quality meat alternative. Grab a shovel, there's plenty of gold to dig out of this episode, so let's get started. Michael, thank you very much for being here. So excited to have you on.
Yeah, thanks. Great to see you. Great to catch up. It's been a little while. We've had some emails back and forward, but yeah, good to see you. Not quite in the flesh, but at least your face.
For sure, and a few life changes going on for you personally. But what about, first of all, how are you doing in the coronavirus world that we're in?
Yeah, not too bad. Yeah, we're based on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland in Australia. It's probably one of the best spots in the world if you're going to be isolated somewhere. We live right near the beach, and beaches here have stayed open. And yeah, so on the personal and family front, it's been fine. And then on the business front, it's disrupted some parts of our business, but opened up opportunities in other parts. And actually overall, we've been growing nicely through this whole period. So. I think we're sort of counting our lucky stars. We've been fortunate.
Yeah, I love it. Well, let's start off by talking about building profitable companies, and then after that, we can delve into some of your own vast experiences too. So the question that a lot of people ask me, which I wanted to throw out to you, a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs, they want to know what's the best way to come up with a new business idea. Do you have a set formula that you follow, or is it more of an intuition that you've just honed after years and years in the entrepreneurial world?
Yeah, I think the big learning for me, and I didn't do this early on, but I've done it with my last business or my current business, is like find what you are personally like deeply, truly passionate about, and pursue that. Like, so for me, just as an example, for my last business, Shoes of Prey, was custom women's shoes. I loved lots of parts of that business, but I was never like deeply passionate about women's shoes, just not at all. I love the building the brand. I love the manufacturing. I love the supply chain. I love the building partnerships and the sales and the retail. All of that I loved, but the actual product I just wasn't into. Whereas with my new business, Fable, and we'll talk more about it, I'm deeply passionate about the product and the mission and what we're working on. And it makes like such a difference. Like I wake up on a Saturday morning, when I could be doing something else, and the only thing I want to do is read about what's going on in the industry or listen to podcasts relating to food and relating to what we're doing, versus back with Shoes of Prey, I didn't read fashion magazines in my spare time. And that difference, plays out. I can see it playing out in so many ways into like my like deep understanding of the customer, the value proposition that they're looking for. So yeah, I'd highly recommend starting something in an area that you're deeply passionate about.
Yeah, I love it. So the answer's almost, I guess it's sort of both worlds, isn't it? Because you're building up that intuition that you've had, from more experience in the game. There were some business ventures that I've been involved in the past where you reach a point where you say, well, if we have to pay for almost every aspect of this whole supply chain, and it's not something that inherently I'm that passionate about, well, all of a sudden you have a moment. The big epiphany for me was when I was involved in a film and a book project where it was basically for the first time in my life at the age of about 32 years old, I thought, wow, this is the new path that I want to follow. This is where I feel like I'm working with purpose for the first time. And it just gives you a whole new level of energy, doesn't it? I can't imagine what it would be like for you after, working on women's shoes, which was obviously an amazing business and had an incredible global audience, but doing something now that you, after taking some reflection time to be able to, start this one from scratch as a real purpose-driven, heart-centered project.
No, in my experience, makes a huge difference. Yeah. Yep.
For sure. Well, once you've got a concept for a new business idea, how important is research to basically test that concept, and how early should you do that research?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the most critical can do early on. I think, yeah, customer research to understand the value proposition of what the customer who you're targeting, what they want, coupled with understanding the business model. I think those are, and that if there is a business model there, I think those are the two most important things to do early on. So yeah, for Fable, yeah, we've got a meat alternative that it's an alternative to slow cooked meats like pulled pork and braised beef, but it's made predominantly from mushrooms and other plant-based ingredients. So before kicking off this business, I've been vegetarian for 4.5 years. So eating all the Beyond Burgers and Impossible Burgers and other products in the market. So I had a good personal understanding of the category. I've also talked to everyone around me, trying to, encourage them to turn vegetarian, and hearing the feedback that they're giving on, why they find it hard, they miss meat, some of the other feedback around the various meat alternative products. And then I just spent a lot of time in supermarket critically watching people shop the meat alternatives, and then after they'd selected something or not selected something, going up and talking to them afterwards about the decision that they made. And yeah, all of that research hugely valuable to the path that we're going down now. Yeah,
I see that you've been very proactive about seeking that feedback. Whereas you see a lot of entrepreneurs who they feel like they have an idea, they're worried that someone else is going to steal it, so they don't go and talk to many people, and they're certainly not proactive about obtaining feedback. I'm not sure if that's an ego thing or if they just think they're onto a winner and they just want to go ahead. But I mean, how many companies do we see that they launch, and how many tens of thousands of dollars and years and things wasted because do you feel like is it like an ego thing or what is it around people who worry about the new business idea being stolen by someone else who they talk to?
I think it's a natural concern. Like if you think you've got these insights and it's a really big potential idea, I think it's a natural concern that you might want to protect that. But in my experience anyway, like building a business is, I think there's some quotes like 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. Like the actual idea itself, if you've had the idea, there's probably 1,000 other people who've had the idea. Your success with that idea will come down to how well you execute on it. And so the pros of getting feedback from people early on far outweigh the risk of someone else stealing your idea. Because even if someone steals your idea, like, are they going to be good at executing and making it happen? The reality is most people aren't going to do that. They're not going to go leave their existing job or whatever they're doing now to start a new idea. And then even if they do, the reality also is it's tough to start a business, and most businesses don't succeed. So yeah, I think the benefits of getting the feedback from people early on far outweigh taking your idea and beating you at it. And if they beat you at it, then yeah, you're probably not the best executor in the first place.
That's right. That's the world of business. And yeah, well said. What about the shoes of prey concept? When did you have a feeling with that you were onto a winner?
Yeah, so yeah, there's a lot of interesting learnings out of this, and it was 10 years of my life. So for that one, I mean, we had a pretty early on. We had the idea that this was a concept that had really good potential, and I think that was a function of we went and talked to everyone around us about the idea and asking them, would you want to design your own shoes? Talking to all the women in our lives, would you want to design your own shoes? And like the overwhelming feedback was like, yes, that would be amazing. Everyone's got this dream of being creative and being able to create something unique and having some kind of fashion item that they've had a in creating and being able to wear it. So the response was kind of overwhelming from people that we spoke to. And so then we ran a test. So we sort of set up a basic kind of supply chain and working with a manufacturing partner in just outside Hong Kong in China, who could produce shoes. And before we built a website or anything, we just used photographs of the different elements of the shoes, and we presented that to our friends and said, hey, these are normally going to retail for $250. We'll do it for half price, and you can design using these images. Would you want to do it? And we kind of emailed that out to like 100 of our friends, and about 25 of them paid the money to design the shoes with us. And so we thought that was pretty good kind of response rate. People were putting money down to do it. So we thought that was a pretty good indication that this might have good potential. Yeah.
What about things like minimum order quantities if you're ordering through Asia? Was that a challenge when you're trying to figure out, like, to test whether or not this is a good idea? And some of these manufacturers, I'm sure, got back to you saying, yeah, if you want to produce 50 million units, then we'll do it for you.
Yeah. I had lots of funny lost in translation conversations on that, where we'd go and explain this concept. Hey, design your own shoes one at a time. And they'd say, oh, yes, we can supply you shoes. Minimum order quantity 10,000. We were like, no, we need to order one. We need a minimum order quantity one. Oh, you mean 1,000? No, we can't do 1,000. No, not even 1,000. One.
Yeah.
We managed to find a couple of, there were a couple of little shoe stores in Hong Kong that did design your own shoes. So our initial kind of manufacturing partner was one of them. So they already had it was a small operation. We were never going to be able to scale with them, but they were happy to partner with us initially, and they were already doing shoes one at a time. So that's how we started.
Yeah, I love it. Well, what about, obviously the journey had a bit of a public ending that was obviously not the outcome that you and your co-founders and the whole team wanted. What were the circumstances? Was it about 10 years later, wasn't it, when the business came undone? What were the circumstances when you thought you had this great concept and all of a sudden 10 years later, not so much? What was the circumstances around that?
Yeah, so basically the journey was we initially did really well in this niche of women who were passionate about designing their own shoes, and these were kind of creative women who had a good sense of their own style and design, and they loved the concept. Like, yeah, the ability to design their own shoes. This was just like totally new, out of this world. Just spoke perfectly to those creative elements that they had. We also did well in some niches like wedding shoes. That's obviously a good place women would want to do something like this, as well as like small, large, wide and narrow sizes. Because we could produce efficiently one at a time, we could service those people who can't buy shoes in their size normally. So we were doing well in these little niches and getting like really high net promoter scores, because in those niches the customers really, really loved the product. But we were never going to be able to scale in those niches. So we went out and did our market research to understand, would the mass market consumer want to buy Shoes of Prey shoes? And we could see all these customers coming to our website. Like, we literally had 10,000 customers coming to our website every day, and we had really low conversion rates. And so we started talking to all these customers who were coming and not buying. And what we realized is most of the women coming to our website weren't those niche customers. They were mass market fashion customers. And when we talked to them, they said, yeah, look, I love the idea of designing my own shoes. That's why I'm coming to your website to have a look, spending time on here. But there's 3 things that are stopping me buying. The first one is we want a simplified shoe design experience. It's, our initial shoe design experience was targeted to that really creative customer. So it was very free form. The mass market consumer wanted to be guided through the process and have a simpler process. The second thing is they wanted a shorter lead time. We had a 5-week turnaround time on our shoes, which is, if you're organizing your wedding shoes, you're doing that more than 5 weeks in advance. If you're small, large, wide or narrow sizes, you'll take anything. You don't mind if it's 5 weeks or more. But if you're a mass market fashion consumer, you're often thinking about a purchase. You need delivery within 2 weeks. So that was the second thing. And then the third thing was price point. We were charging about a 30% premium over the same quality shoes. And the mass market fashion consumer said, I'm keen to do it, but I don't want to pay a premium. So we looked at those 3 things and we realized, well, we can execute on those 3 things. We're going to need to go out and raise venture capital to do it, because we're going to have to build our own shoe factory. To get the lead times down and get more efficient to get the unit costs down. Because at the time we were just working with that little supplier outside of Hong Kong who had 2 shoe stores, so they weren't scaled up.
And how old were you? How old were you at that point when you realized, wow, I have my own shoe manufacturing facility?
Yeah, well, this was about 3 years in. We'd done really well in the first 3 years just in those niches. We hadn't raised any venture capital. It was all self-funded, growing out of its own cash flow. But it was about 3 years in we had this insight. So we needed to build our own factory, and we also needed to hire more software engineers to simplify the shoe design experience. So that's when we went out and raised venture capital. And the story there was, hey, we're doing well in these niches. We need to build our own factory, hire these software engineers because here's all the research we've done. There's this big mass market fashion opportunity, and we need to kind of cross the chasm from these niche customers over to the mass market. And so that's then what we spent the next 5 years executing on. Building our own shoe factory in China, doing shoes one at a time is a massive undertaking. So that took us a good 5 years to get up and running, scaled, running efficiently, and we brought the delivery time down from 5 weeks to we averaged 11 days in our last couple of years, and we brought the unit costs down so we could bring our retail prices down. And we built our software engineering team out to about 10 people and simplified the shoe design experience. So all of that took about 5 years. And then the problem for us was we built the whole value proposition that the mass market fashion customer had asked for, and we realized it just wasn't resonating. Like, we grew sort of 3 or 4x over those 5 years, but we grew to like maybe 12 million Aussie dollars a year in revenue, but we really needed to be at about 30 million a year revenue to break even, because now we had all these fixed costs of a shoe factory and software engineers. So our break even point was about 30 million a year. Based on our customer research, if the mass market customer had have responded the way that our research said she would, we should have been at like 100 million a year revenue. We're in Nordstrom stores in the US. You could design your own shoes on the women's shoe floor, and we're in all the right places for the mass market customer. But now we built this value proposition. We could watch how she behaved on our website and in the Nordstrom stores. And what we realized was we got our research wrong. So the mass market customer thinks she wants to customize. So if you ask her, conscious mind, she thinks she wants to customize them. I mean, who wouldn't? You kind of love the idea of being creative and designing your own shoes. So you ask her, she'll tell you that's what she wants to do because she thinks she does. But deep down, subconsciously, she doesn't want to do that. She doesn't really have the confidence to do it. She doesn't know if the shoes are going to look good. She doesn't really have the time to sit there and design the shoes. And so deep down subconsciously, she really just wants a fashion designer and brand to tell her what's on trend and what to wear. She wants to see what's popular on Instagram and buy that exact shoe and that brand, which is kind of the antithesis of designing her own shoes. So what she consciously thought she wanted is the opposite to what she actually really wanted. And we built our whole value proposition and business around the opposite of what she actually really wanted.
And this was
what brought us unstuck.
Yeah, this was research that you continued to conduct every year or every few months, or was it something that you did comprehensively early on and you just ran with that assumption?
No, it was constant research. Yeah, I mean, we were running surveys with all of these people who come into our website and weren't buying. I mean, Nordstrom are the biggest retailer of women's shoes in the US. They were bought into the concept working. They thought it would work as well. Their research told them the same thing. We went to experts like them to get feedback on it, and they even invested in the business. So it was we ran focus groups. Like we did everything that we watched how consumers behaved in different environments. We did everything that I think we could have done, except the one thing we didn't do because we couldn't was actually watching how female fashion shoppers behaved when designing their own shoes. And the reason we couldn't do that is no one had built this before, so it didn't exist. So it was only once we built the value proposition, and you could go to shoesofprey.com, simple design process, order and receive in 11 days, good price point. It was only once we built all of that, we could watch how the customer behaved on the site, and then she wasn't buying, and then we'd talk to her and delve into like, why didn't you buy? And then that helped us uncover, this research that we've done on what customers are telling us is actually different to what they really want. And we're a bit screwed because of that.
Wow. Was there a single moment or conversation where you and your partners had thought, like, the realization where it all dawned on you that, wow, this thing that we thought was I know it's obviously not the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow type thing that you were aiming for at any stage with this, but it's a business that you were continuing to grow. Can you take us into that moment when you realized for the first time that it was irrecoverable, that no matter what you did, it was basically all over? The dream for this particular business, which was 10 years of your life, was over.
It's a good question. It was It was probably more like ripping a Band-Aid off slowly than than a single moment. So it was kind of even more painful because of that. It was. I mean, it was gradual. Like even as we kind of, as we gradually simplified our shoe design experience, like our sales were going up every time we would do that. Like the research wasn't completely wrong, but the sales weren't going up anywhere near as much as we'd expected. So we could see like, we're making progress. It's not as much progress as we want, but it's not like, we need to keep going because we think this will still work. And we sort of convinced ourselves that it needed all of those pieces of the value proposition to work. So and I still think that the logic made sense. It was just the research was wrong. So, and even if we simplified the shoe design experience, if our delivery times were still 4 weeks, we might get a bit of growth, which we were seeing, but we wouldn't get the sort of good scaled growth that we were looking for. And so it was like over a few years, it was like, well, we're not growing as much as we need to, but we're growing enough to keep pursuing it and to raise more capital. The venture capital firms and Nordstrom was still on board with it through that. And so it was only really when we delivered the whole value proposition, I suppose that moment came, when we delivered the whole value proposition. Our sales are like less than half of where they need to be. We're running out of cash in the bank. It's going to be hard to raise. Like we went out to investors, and it was clear we weren't going to be able to raise more money easily, or even at all in the end. So it wasn't a single moment or conversation, but it was ripping a Band-Aid off slowly, working it out.
And I feel like one of the most unsung elements of being an entrepreneur is the mental health battle, the roller coaster. I mean, you've seen it now. You and I have both seen it with various businesses and projects and things that we've been involved in. How was your mental state at the time? Were you on the brink of burnout? Were you feeling down on yourself? Where were you at mentally while all of that stuff was starting to unravel?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely tough. I was living in LA. So I didn't necessarily have all my family and I had some friends over there that I'd made, obviously, but not the kind of friendship groups that you grew up with and family around. So I was married, so I had my wife and did have some good friends there. But those kind of things made it harder. I mean, it was tough. Like, this vision that we'd had all this success early on. We'd raised kind of 35 million Aussie dollars, sort of 25 million US dollars from investors, partnered with Nordstrom. Like there were all these exciting things that had kind of built up over time. And then, suddenly gradually coming to the realization that this wasn't going to work out. It was hard on, there's not even that really adjectives to describe it. I mean, I think the things that, helped me to get through it were like reflecting on the fact that we were dealing in women's shoes and we were dealing with investors' money. These are important things, but it's not like we're dealing with life and death. It's not like if we're a medical company that's people weren't dying because we were failing. So I kind of spent a lot of time reflecting on, I've got my health. My we've got our health. My first son was born kind of during all of this challenging period. And that was a bit of a life revelation that, Shoes of Prey is going poorly at the moment. My career is in a bit of a shambles and all those dreams are, but I've got a healthy son and this is a wonderful life experience.
Puts it all into perspective.
Yeah, exactly. All that helped put it into perspective. Yeah, that's it. So I think that's kind of the big thing that helped me get through. And then, with the benefit of hindsight, one of the things I learnt from that experience was, as tough as things can be in the moment, you can get through those things and come out and enjoy yourself on the other side of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of people, myself included, I've really enjoyed the posts that you've written, just the reflections on the journey. It's so real, it's so raw, and I think it's really inspiring to people. Obviously, once that happened, the journey wasn't over for you. It was the end of just a single chapter in a book that you're in the process of writing and doing all these amazing things out now. So I wanted to quickly bring up a quote that you actually wrote a year ago when you were reflecting on that Shoes of Prey journey. I always hate my own words being read back to me, so I apologize.
I'm scared.
You said, if I ever find myself in a position where I'm attempting to change consumer behavior, I will ensure I've peeled back the layers to truly understand the psychology of my target customer. So if I ever find myself in a position where I'm attempting to change consumer behavior, I will ensure I've peeled back the layers to truly understand the psychology of my target customer. Do you still stand by that? And how can aspiring entrepreneurs action that in a practical sense?
Yeah, so yeah, definitely still stand by that. And I mean, that just speaks to, we were trying to get consumers to change their behavior by designing shoes rather than ordering pre-existing shoes. And our market research failed because we listened to what the customer consciously thought she wanted, and we didn't peel back the layers to understand the deep sort of psyche of what she was thinking and what was driving her to buy shoes. And yeah, maybe if we'd done that, we might have uncovered that she said she wanted to design shoes, but she didn't really want to. So yeah, definitely still stand by that learning. And I think there's two practical ways to deal with that. One is to actually do that deep psychological research if you are trying to change consumer behavior. And I would definitely go deeper than we did with Shoes of Prey if I was doing that again. The other way to get around that is to not change consumer behavior. And that's the lesson that I've taken with Fable. So, to delve into that a little bit, rather than trying to get, I've been vegetarian for 4.5 years. I've tried to convert everyone around me to being vegetarian. I think I've convinced 2 people. I caught up with one of them the other day. They're not vegetarian anymore. So I'm trying to change people to become vegetarian. Either I'm not good at it or it's hard to do. It's probably a bit of both.
You'll have to throw in some cash incentives.
Yeah. That's a good idea. Maybe that would work. Probably not. I've realized trying to convince people to eat hemp seed patties and falafel balls and salad, that most people, I've done it, but most people don't want to do that. They still love the taste and texture of meat. So the learning for me there is, don't try to change their behavior and make them eat hemp seed patties and falafel balls. Give them meat, something that has the taste and texture of meat, but just don't make it from animals, make it from other ingredients. And so that's we're not the only ones doing this. Like Beyond and Impossible and others are doing meat alternatives. And that's the kind of approach that the whole this alternative protein industry is taking. Don't try to convince people to change their behavior and not eat meat. Give them meat, but just make it from something different. And so it means that in all of our product development, our big focus is on making sure that the product has the taste and texture of meat. Like, that's the number one part of the value proposition. We've done that with Fable. Once that's achieved, it means you don't have to change consumer behavior. They can eat the same way, cook the same way, all the dishes that they've done before, but just doing it without animals.
Do you feel fortunate? It seems like with Shoes of Prey, you were out on a limb so much trying to do this yourselves. Do you feel more comfortable being in an industry now with Fable, which obviously we'll talk a lot more about shortly? Do you feel more comfortable knowing that you're part of a massively growing industry? Obviously, you're doing it in your own way, but you've got, as much research as you could possibly want to help underpin some of the decisions that you're making, to take some of the guesswork that it seems like experience has taught you, that even when you have the research, can be a lot more than just what the research suggests.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, I'm finding the experience much easier because of that. There's pros and cons, right? So it means there's other people doing meat alternatives, which I love from a mission perspective. I want to end industrial animal agriculture. If it's Fable that does it, amazing. If it's other people who do it, that's still achieving the mission. So that's really good. But from a purely business perspective, putting aside the mission, it means we've got competitors in the space, and consumers have a choice of different products. So that's the con of operating in a category that other people are operating in. But the pro is, just like you described, there's other people doing it too. We can learn from each other. I can actually go into the supermarket and watch how consumers shop the alternative protein section, whereas with Shoes of Prey, there was no other website or nowhere else that you could design your own shoes, so I couldn't watch how consumers did it.
Yeah, you get in trouble if you end up in girls' bedrooms uninvited for some market research.
Exactly. Yeah.
What about on the shoes of prey side? Just to round off on on that incredible chapter in your life, what was the biggest personal cost to you after, was it time, was it money, were there other things after 10 years of being on that journey? What was the personal cost? The biggest personal cost, rather.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there were a few. There was the financial side. I'd worked for 10 years on well below market salary and had put quite a bit of my own money into the business beforehand. So I'd sort of ended that 10 years in my late 30s with not much money to my name. So whereas if I'd stayed down the corporate path, I'd be in a different place financially. So that was a cost. Another cost I wouldn't directly attribute to Shoes of Prey, but it was definitely a catalyst. So one of my other co-founders in Shoes of Prey, Jody and I were married when we started Shoes of Prey. We divorced partway through the experience of the Shoes of Prey journey. We stayed really good friends, stayed good business partners, and still to this day we chat nearly weekly. But definitely Shoes of Prey. It wasn't because of Shoes of Prey. We met at 21 and just grew apart in our 20s. But Shoes of Prey was definitely a catalyst. Like living with the person that you're starting a business with puts all sorts of strains and pressures on a relationship and a marriage. So that was another piece that was a fairly big personal cost through it all. I'd say those are probably the big two.
I feel like marriage, has enough strains as itself. I can't imagine throwing in the added complexities of raising tens of millions of dollars and trying to figure out manufacturing and building an international team and just the convoluted moments around doubting your market research and signing deals with some of the biggest department stores in the world. It's a lot for your relationship, but I guess it says a lot about the character of each of you when you still are able to maintain a very cordial relationship these days and being respectful that although it was, each of your journeys have forked, that you still respect each other and that you're there to support each other.
Yeah, no, thanks. It was, it was definitely a tough period, but we were, it was a mutual decision to separate. I think that made it easier. I think a lot of marriages, the couples don't stay on good terms. If it's one-sided, I can see that would be much harder. So we both wanted to actively wanted to stay friends and actively wanted to keep working together because we were, both wanting to make Shoes of Prey a success. So we really kind of took a lot of work, but to make sure that, okay, if we're going to separate, let's make sure that the friendship remains and the business partnership remains. So I guess we kind of really focused on that, and we were able to achieve that. Yeah,
I suppose a business partnership is like a marriage in itself. So when you find yourself when they overlap, it can be tough. But so after that, you went to Europe, you went to Denmark for almost half a year of soul searching, and now you're living on the Sunshine Coast. And I know after the grind that you had living in LA trying to get all this stuff done, and lifestyle became such a huge focus of you, and I guess quality of health and mental health and everything all part of that. A few months ago, you wrote that 2019 was the best year of your life, which I bet you would not have in any way expected would be the case if you had a crystal ball looking forward. What contributed to 2019 being the best year of your life?
Yeah, so it was totally wouldn't have expected that. I mean, Shoes of Prey, I finished up with Shoes of Prey in the middle of 2018. So that first half of 2018 was, pretty horrible, like laying off 200 people, shutting down a factory, the kind of 10-year dream ending, telling investors that we can't get them a return, can't even get them their money back, let alone a return. I would not have expected that to play out. I think the things that drove that, taking 6 months off, as you kind of touched on, my wife's Danish, so we went over to Denmark for 6 months. We kind of had to do that because our second child was born. When I left Shoes of Prey, my US visa was attached to Shoes of Prey, so I had like 60 days to leave the country. Asta was like 2 months from being born, so Katrine was like butting up against the period where she couldn't fly anymore. Katrine's not Australian, so we wouldn't have had health coverage in Australia to have the baby. So Denmark was the only place we could go to actually have the baby without having to fork out all the costs ourselves.
A whole new basket of stresses to deal with.
Yeah, they were adding all of that to the mix. Yep. And with a 1.5-year-old in tow. So we went to Denmark, but it turned out really well. So we kind of, Katrine's parents have a house in Copenhagen, and sort of on the bottom floor, and there was kind of a floor in the middle where we all hung out. So it was really nice to spend some time with Katrine's family when the kids were young, and Asta being born. And for me, it was just a great period to have a reset. Like I didn't have to have any pressure to like find a job or work out what I was going to do next. I just knew, okay, these 6 months, I can focus on being a dad and just do whatever I feel like doing. And that sort of led me to, because I just ended up reading a lot of books. And because I've been vegetarian for 4.5 years, I just ended up reading more about industrial animal agriculture. There were other areas that I was really passionate about and started exploring too, like community living and some different areas like that. But I just ended up reading all these different areas that I was passionate about. And then towards the end of the 6 months, started thinking about, okay, well, I mean, I'm passionate. There's like 2 or 3 areas I'm deeply passionate about. Is there a business model or something that I could? Well, actually, I didn't even want to start a new business. I was thinking like, okay, maybe I'll go work for some in categories where is there growing. Alternatives is a space that's been growing really quickly for the last couple of years. So I thought, all right, I'll go work for someone else in the meat alternative space. So it kind of allowed me, the 6 months allowed me to go and just unhindered and no time pressure, just go and explore whatever I wanted to, just where my intellectual curiosity took me. And I think that helped me to narrow in, back to your very first question, around around like finding what my passion was and where I might want to do something. And so that was really good. Then we made, as you touched on, we made the kind of lifestyle decision to come, when we came back to Australia, to live on the Sunshine Coast. I grew up in Brisbane, which is where I know you and Mark and the rest of your family. So we want, and my extended family is all Brisbane Sunshine Coast based. So with 2 young kids in tow, we wanted to be back near all of them, grandparents and aunties and uncles, all kind of stuff. It's much cheaper costs of living on the Sunshine Coast than down in Sydney. So we initially planned to go back to Sydney, budgeted to rent a house in kind of inner Sydney. It's like $1,500 a week or $2,000 a week to rent a nice sort of 3-bedroom house. So we sort of took that budget and looked at what we could get on the Sunshine Coast, and we've ended up renting a house like literally right on the beach. The beach is 100 meters to my left as I sit here. Little private walk track through the bush, and we're on the beach. We've got a pool, giant barbecue, perfect for cooking plant-based meat. So just the lifestyle here is amazing. Great back being around family, reconnecting with kind of friends that we grew up with. It's a combination of now doing what I'm really deeply passionate about, the living environment, and then also just the family side of things. Like I'm just loving being a dad, and I know you're having experience too. Like it's just the whole perspective, all of that for me has just added up to 2019 was genuinely amazing. Just deep personal satisfaction.
It's funny, isn't it, with children, the experience that you could just, I've always wanted to have kids, but I just never understood the amount of meaning that it creates in your life when you just learn so much about the world from your kids. Like Sophie, our daughter, who turns 1 in about a week, things like where you realize that things like dancing, it's just a completely innate human behavior. They just instinctively dance at 8 months old or whenever they do it. It's such a, I don't know, it just brings so much joy and meaning into your life. But what do you feel when you see media outlets who are, you're getting a lot of amazing coverage about Fable, this awesome new business venture that you've got? Yet a lot of these media outlets in the past have described you, the biggest media outlets in the country describe you as a failed entrepreneur and, part of collapsed company, Shoes of Prey. do you just try and ignore that, or does it motivate you to succeed?
Yeah, it's good question. I mean, it's a whole combination of feelings. Like, it's definitely hit to your ego, or kind of feeling of self-belief. And I think that also kind of contributed to my initial thoughts when I came back to Australia, was to go work for another company, because I just, like, literally the thought of starting another business made me feel ill. Like, my self-confidence was down, having, I had good understanding of why Shoes of Prey failed, but, it still felt like, I'd messed some things up we'd basically messed up that market research and didn't get those insights right. And I was like, well, okay, yeah, can I succeed in business, or maybe I'm not made out to be an entrepreneur. So yeah, and reading obviously contributes to that. So it's a mix of those feelings. I think on the flip side, spending the time to, like, deeply reflect on the Shoes of Prey experience, I think helped build my confidence again. Like, we had done a lot of things really well, and if our market research had have been right, it would be an amazing business today. Like, I think of course we made lots of other mistakes too, but I think we got all the other pieces of the business, mostly right. It was just that one insight that we didn't get right. So that sort of brought a bit of confidence back. And then when sort of kicking off Fable, and the only reason I ended up starting a business again was I came back to Australia, wanted to work in the alternative protein space. There were just no jobs. Like, everyone in the category is a startup, and there was no jobs in the category. So it was like, my decision was either, do I go back to the corporate, something like that, or if I'm deeply passionate about this space and want to be in it, I'm going to have to start a business, because I can't get a job in the category, so because there just aren't any jobs. So that's what kind of drove me back to starting a business. And initially, I genuinely didn't want to do it, but then once I started doing it, like, it felt good again, being in those early stages. I went back and talked to all of the old Shoes of Prey investors. I mean, I've been talking to them all the time anyway, but talked to them about the idea, and they were excited about the idea. Their feedback was, look, yeah, Michael, we'll back you again. Like, if you get this to a place where you're raising money and it can work, like, we'd love to look at it and back you again. And yeah, it was deeply satisfying to have, when we raised our round of funding in November, to have Blackbird Ventures and Grok Ventures, which is Mike Cannon-Brooks's family office, to have those two co-lead the round, because they were two large investors in Shoes of Prey, had lost all their money in Shoes of Prey, but they were willing to go. So that with me, so that was kind of deeply satisfying, and helped on the confidence side. And yeah, and I just found myself loving what I was doing again. So I think that's made it easy to, and the media has now been supportive too. Like, the media, if you reflect on why the media exists, it headlines, they want to drive clicks and advertising revenue. So a headline about, Shoes of Prey's collapse, that's a great sounding headline, and sort of laying into the people behind it, that gets, that's the kind of almost business industry gossip that people want to read. I find myself drawn to those kind of articles too. It's just an innate human psychology. So, that's the reason that journalists want to write those kind of headlines. And it doesn't change the emotional feeling from it, but at least you can have a logical reflection on it that, that's life. That's what the media is always going to do. Doesn't mean it's, that there might be some truth to it, but it doesn't mean you have to, feel awful and not do anything because of that. Yeah.
And it doesn't factor in the future as well.
Right,
Describing
exactly,
you as a failed entrepreneur is, it means, I guess, they're only taking into consideration one aspect of the past and not factoring in all the assets, like the investors and people that you, the investors that you mentioned, and just the network and learnings and everything else that you bring to the table. But at the same time, you've got that carrot of going back to the corporate world, where I feel like the thing for people who have a profession, like a corporate job Monday to Friday, they don't realize how lucky they have it when they can just work 5 days a week. They can switch their phone off on weekends. They can have a six-figure salary and just not have the stress of anyone else who is an entrepreneur, where you don't really have an off switch. And like you said, from the moment you sort of activate that new business idea, it is potentially a 7 days a week thing for an indetermined or undeterminable amount of time.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, you've got Fable now, which is just such an incredible story. Obviously, still very, very young in the journey. Can you let us know a bit about Fable and the product and who the market is and what you're trying to achieve?
Yeah, so once I had that realization that if I want to go into this category, I got to start something myself. I started thinking through how I would what kind of product I'd want to develop, how I'd want to enter the category, and I didn't want to compete head to head with the existing players in the market. Beyond and Impossible between them have raised nearly $1 billion US. Plenty of good companies in Europe and some good ones in Australia too. So I wanted to differentiate and find another gap in the market. Most of those businesses are doing minced beef or ground beef and doing burger patties. So first thought was, okay, well, there's plenty of other types of meat out there. I should try to replicate something else. And then secondly, I'm a pretty healthy eater. Shop at my local farmers markets, do a lot of my own cooking, and I try to eat a healthy, kind of minimally processed diet. So my thought was, would it be possible to create a meat alternative out of really natural, healthy, whole food ingredients? And so it was kind of those two insights sort of led me to kind of researching more in the space. I obviously don't have a food background, so I just started talking to anyone in the food industry who would be willing to listen to me and answer my questions. And that kind of led to the thought of using mushrooms as a base ingredient for a meat alternative. So most meat alternatives are made from textured vegetable protein. So it's kind of the protein is stripped out of a soybean or a pea. And then it's this high heat, high pressure process to turn it into a texture that's like a minced beef. And then you add different flavors and ingredients. And so most meat alternatives are made from textured vegetable protein. So I was exploring, could you make a meat alternative out of mushrooms? Mushrooms are really natural, healthy food that we should be eating more of. And they've kind of got a lot of the umami flavors of meat in them. It's just like the texture's, not really meat-like for most mushrooms. So that sort of led me to researching mushrooms. I ended up meeting the two guys who are now my co-founders. So Jim Fuller started his career as a chef. He grew up in Texas, so grew up on all like slow cooked meats like pulled pork, braised beef. Started his career as a chef, worked as a chef for 10 years in Texas, wanted to understand the science behind what he was cooking. So went and studied agricultural science and chemical engineering. And he majored in mycology in his agricultural science degree, which is mushroom science. And then he's worked as a mushroom scientist in Australia for the last 12 years.
Talk about a niche.
So he's got this weird skill set of like chef and mushroom scientist in one human being. Never met anyone else with that combo. And then Chris McLaughlin, he's been in the sort of farming most of his career, co-founded Australia's largest organic mushroom farm. He was Young Farmer of the Year and Organic Farmer of the Year in Australia in 2018. Chris and Jim have got this deep technical expertise in mushrooms. I sort of come at it from the business side of things. Together we developed our first product, which replicates those slow cooked meats that Jim grew up on, pulled pork and braised beef. The value proposition that we focused on in developing the product was, number one, taste and texture. It's got to have the taste and texture of meat. It's got to cook like meat. Number two is price that people buy food on. So people are willing to pay a bit of a premium for meat alternatives at the moment, but not too much. And ultimately, if we want to end industrial animal agriculture, we want to produce products that taste as good as meat and are cheaper than meat. If you can do that, you can get even the most avid meat eater buying meat alternatives rather than meat. And then the third piece of our value proposition is it's plant-based, and it's healthy. So it's 2/3 mushrooms. The other ingredients are all natural plant-based ingredients. So it's nothing artificial. It's clean, minimally processed, and has all the health benefits of shiitake mushrooms, which are used in Chinese medicine for thousands of years as a really healthy ingredient, and a whole bunch of Western science speaking to all the health benefits of shiitake mushrooms. So that's the product we created. So we launched in December last year in partnership with Heston Blumenthal, the British chef. So we launched in his, it's now closed, but was open then, Dinner by Heston down in Melbourne. And Heston is using the product in the Fat Duck in London and Perfectionist Cafe in London.
So Fat Duck's the 3-star Michelin, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was world's best restaurant in 2005. And yep.
Wow, incredible. And what was his restaurant in Melbourne? Was that a temporary one?
It's no, it was a permanent one in the Crown Casino. So it was in the Crown Casino. It's probably there for sort of 4 or 5 years, but closed late last year. Closed early this year. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what an incredible partnership. Having one of the most acclaimed. Obviously, you've got a phenomenal team with your co-founders. But how did you establish a relationship with one of the most renowned chefs in the history of the world to help you launch this whole new business?
Yeah. So I guess it kind of came from 2 angles. So one, we kind of designed the product for chefs to use. So it's kind of like, we designed it to be like a slow cooked meat is, meat doesn't have a lot of base flavor. It's kind of the things that you do with it, the spices that you add, the sauces that you add into it to turn it into a dish. Slow cooked meats go great with barbecue sauce and in curries and Italian sort of pastas, bolognese, ragu, lasagna, things like that. So we kind of designed the product to be a good base ingredient for chefs to use. We were fortunate that Jim, co-founder Jim, had gotten to know Heston a couple of years ago just in the mushrooms world. Heston's been sort of getting into the kind of brain-gut connection and getting into all the health benefits of mushrooms. And he and Jim had met through a Thai mushroom professor at this Thai mushroom professor's son's wedding in Thailand. And so they met at this wedding, got on like a house on fire because they both live and breathe food. It was a real thrill for Jim, actually, because Heston was the reason that Jim went and studied chemical engineering and agricultural science. So Jim had been working as a chef for 10 years. He'd never met Heston, but was just inspired by him and his like scientific understanding of cooking. And so that's what prompted him to go and study chemical engineering and agricultural science to understand the science behind what he was cooking. So yeah, when he met Heston at this event and they got on like a house on fire, and then I think it was even that same trip, Heston and Jim went and visited some mushroom farms for a couple of days. Jim sort of took him around the places that he was working with in Thailand at the time, and so they had this deep kind of personal connection and had gotten to know each other. And then once we developed the Fable product, we took it and showed Heston, and yeah, he absolutely loved it. Couldn't believe it was made from mushrooms and was super keen to work with it. So that was that real thrill for us, and it's been an amazing kind of proof point for then when we go and talk to other chefs. It just makes
we've got Heston on board
conversations. Yeah. So that's
for sure. And what about you've obviously done a fantastic job raising money with Shoes of Prey and now with Fable. What is it about your ability to go out there? Obviously, there's a lot more to the whole picture, but what's the best way to raise money? And a lot of entrepreneurs who reach a point where they feel like they do need some external funding, should they be looking beyond just the money?
So my experience is just with raising money from venture capital firms. So there's lots of other capital sources, but I can only really speak to raising money from venture capital firms. I mean, the thing that those firms are looking for, particularly in the early stages of a startup, is that there is a big, like $1 billion market opportunity and opportunity with your business. And so the things that are important to them are things like, market size. If you're successful and build a big business, is the market big enough for you to become $1 billion plus valuation company? Product market fit. And in the earlier stages before you've launched, obviously you can't prove that, but is there a sort of thesis that what you're developing is going to fit with a broad segment of consumers? The founding team and what's their sort of background, skill sets, abilities, and drive to make this a success? Are there proof points that they're not going to quit? So, are they fully committed to this? Are they deeply passionate about it? That's where the whole doing something that you're personally deeply passionate about. Kind of helps through the fundraising process as well. So those are kind of the main things that they're looking for. And so if you can present something to them that that meets all of those criteria, they're going to be interested to invest. Yeah.
What about these companies like Impossible Foods and Beyond, Beyond Meat? These are the companies that certainly here in America, they're attracting massive amounts of attention. How do you feel about them with Fable and the other players that are in the industry?
So it's actually great for us. So going back to where we've differentiated, we're replicating a different type of meat to them in a slow cooked meat. And so we're complementary rather than directly competitive with those brands. So we've just recently launched into Singapore, and pre-COVID, we were starting to get into some restaurants in Singapore, and our distributor over there, basically they also sell Impossible Foods in Singapore, and so and Impossible have been really successful in Singapore. I think it's their best market per capita, something like that. But this distributor, basically their pitch to restaurants is, if Impossible's working well for you, clearly you've got demand from consumers for a meat alternative. That's working well for your ground beef or your burgers, or now they're doing a ground pork. Impossible works well in those dishes. What about your slow cooked meat dishes? You might want a meat alternative in there, and here's Fable. So the sell is, we're not competing head to head, and the fact that Impossible or Beyond are already in a restaurant makes the sell easier for us. And then the second point of difference is our kind of no artificial ingredients, minimally processed piece. And so a lot of the chefs like that. They'll sometimes get customers in who are looking for really minimally processed foods and want a meat alternative, and we fit that bill nicely. So it's great for us that those companies are succeeding on a business level. It's great on a mission level because they're helping the same customer as us to reduce their meat consumption. They've got all this money too behind them to help educate those consumers that, hey, there are these great meat alternatives out there. You should come and try them. And they give me, going back to that market research piece, they give me the ability to go into a supermarket or a restaurant and watch how consumers are behaving and shopping these products. And so I can see and learn from that firsthand and understand more about where Fable can fit in the market.
I feel like every year there's more and more awareness around what healthy food is and giving people an idea into understanding an ingredient list. Like over here, there are things like LaCroix, the sparkling water, where everyone's like, wow, this is amazing. It only contains natural flavors, which are natural. And then you realize that actually not all natural flavors are natural. And I feel like Fable's only in a better position as time progresses, as the consumers are naturally just more and more of what they're putting into their bodies, and they don't want a whole laundry list of ingredients into something that's supposed to be an alternative to 100% beef.
Yep. No, exactly. Yeah, we kind of feel like we sit at hopefully what will be the apex of two really big trends. There's the meat alternative trend, which is clearly very big. And then there's this whole, as you touched on, this whole kind of health food trend. And I think mushrooms is like this kind of bubbling up and coming trend. Like they are a crazily healthy food. In the Western countries, we eat 2.3 kilograms, about 5 pounds of mushrooms per person per year. In Asia, they eat 13.5 kilos, about 30 pounds of mushrooms per person per year. It's like a massive, massive difference. In the Western markets, we should be eating a lot more mushrooms. We kind of see Fable as a way to help people reduce their meat consumption and replace that with mushrooms, which is overall much, much better for you.
What an incredible business. Well, what happens if heaven forbid the stars don't align? Would you ever go back to the corporate world, or could you ever go back to the corporate world after you've had the taste of freedom and rubbing shoulders with some of the real change makers around the world and the excitement of closing these venture capital deals and things? How do you feel about the idea of ever going back to the corporate world?
Yeah, I mean, like you touched on before, there are a lot of attractive benefits to working in the corporate world, like 9 to 5, being able to have like called hobbies. Is that what they are? Things that you do outside of work. I've kind of forgotten. And a like consistent salary. Oh my God, that would be nice too. So yeah, I would never write it off completely. But I mean, I think when I was coming to the end of my time in Denmark, like I sat down and realizing there were no jobs in Australia in alternative protein, I did a couple of interviews with recruiters looking at corporate jobs, and it was kind of a horrible time because I had this sick feeling no matter what I did, sick feeling about starting another business and a sick feeling talking to these recruiters about going into the corporate world, and the sick feeling was a little bit less on the entrepreneurial side. So that's where I kind of ended up. I don't know if this failed again. Maybe it would be too much to go and try and start again a third time, and maybe I would go back to the corporate world. But I think don't think I'm particularly built for it. I hope no one if I'm ever going into the corporate world, I hope no one ever listens to this, because I'll have to try and say the opposite in my interviews.
We'll wipe all the data online before you
Please.
need to start handing your resume out. Well, let's now move into the Win the Day rocket round, where we ask you 10 questions and you can just give a really quick answer. Number 1, what quote inspires you the most?
There's a Steve Jobs quote that I always get the wording not exactly right, but it's something along the lines of, if you're working on something that you really care about, you don't have to be pushed. The kind of vision pulls you and guides you.
Morning coffee or evening wine?
I like a bit of both, but if I've got to pick one, morning coffee.
What's one bit of advice you would give your 18-year-old self?
Travel. I went through straight from high school to uni. Go travel for a year and work out what it is that you're passionate about. I think that 6 months I had in Denmark was amazing, and it would have been actually smart to go do that when I was 18.
Love it. What book do you gift the most?
Eating Animals by Jonathan Safran Foer. I've probably given that to about 50 people. It's the book that converted me to being vegetarian.
That was the catalyst. That one book was what you made the decision.
Yeah, I've been getting there gradually, but that book kind of tipped me over the edge. It's the best laid out case for anything I've ever read. I finished reading that book and it's like, I just can't, there's nothing left that I can justify eating meat, except the fact that I like the taste, but there is every other thing points to it's crazy sweet meat.
I guess couples have to read it together because you don't want to have, you're sharing meals together, especially in quarantine, could lead to some interesting moments around the breakfast, lunch and dinner table. Was there a vulnerability?
2 copies, so you're sorted out.
Sounds good. Was there a vulnerability you once hid within that has ended up becoming your superpower?
Oh, that's a good question. No, I can't think of a good thing. Plenty of vulnerabilities, but I'm not sure I've managed to turn any of them around to be a superpower. Do you have an answer to that yourself?
No, I really don't. Well, I guess the thing for me was when one of the biggest things that I really hit in was just these battles around anxiety, because I feel like if you come from a good family and go to a good school and you're raised in a place like Australia, you just feel like you've got all the ingredients to succeed. And when you feel like you're not at a level that's really your own expectations, but you feel like society's putting on you, it can create this whole heap of anxiety and really low feelings of self-worth. And it was only once I got older, even really in the last sort of 4 or 5 years, that I realized that enabled me to connect with a lot of people, where I was then able to help inspire them from the circumstances and things that they're in. But I feel like any vulnerability disappears once we start to talk more. It's really more about shame around vulnerability. Starts to erode as we start to talk about that publicly. So I think some of the things that we're keeping deep within, when you can have a wider, more public conversation around some of the challenges and adversities and things that you face, and some of the things that are causing you shame, as long as you're having this conversation with the intent of having a productive outcome, then I think that can lead to being a superpower.
Yeah, that's a good answer. And actually, that insight has prompted a related one for me, the anxiety and fear of failing a second time is definitely a massive driver for me in Fable. And yeah, knowing what it was like, thinking about going back into the corporate world, not wanting to do that is a massive driver. So I think that fear of failure definitely pushes me to be up at 6 a.m. and talking to potential, like I was this morning, talking to potential customers in the US for Fable, and working late at night, and that, I think using that as a motivator is helping.
It's a good tie-in for question 6. What's one thing you've learned about failure?
It's not as you will come out of it on the other side. The fact I went from like some of the lowest periods of my life in the first half of 2018 when closing down Shoes of Prey to having the best year of my life in 2019 was just a massive turnaround. That knowing now, I think my resilience levels are much higher now, knowing that no matter what situation I find myself in, and no matter in the moment, this feeling might be horrible. You can come out the other side in a even stronger place.
And we'll link to that article, that post that you wrote from about 2019 too. I think that's a really interesting lesson, that sometimes after the biggest adversities that you go through, after what you had as such a public and such high stakes, knowing that the best year of your life was just around the corner is such an incredible lesson, I think, for so many people. So I'll make sure we include a link to that. Number 7, if you could sit on a park bench and have a conversation with someone now or someone from history, who would it be?
It's a good question. This might be, I don't know if this is a weird answer, and I don't want this to come across wrong. I would to sit next to and talk to Hitler, and to try and like understand like how someone he was clearly a very talented man, like an amazing orator, but how, like, why use those talents to do some of the most like evil, horrible things that anyone has ever done in the world, like trying to eliminate a race like of people and cause tens of millions of people to die. I think that and I'd love to have a go at convincing him, if it was like a time machine and I was talking to him before he did all that, trying to convince him to put your powers to like ending industrial animal agriculture or doing something good.
He could have been a good first business partner for you.
Yeah, shit. I'm not sure. Yeah, my trust levels would be low, but I think just trying to get into the mind of him. I mean, maybe it'd also be a weird conversation. He might park bench, so maybe it's not a smart answer, but I think it would be fascinating. Yeah,
for sure. What tool or resource best helps you run your life or your business?
Don't know about a tool or resource, but a tip that I started doing a couple of years ago, which I think is becoming more common, so maybe more people are doing it. But when I send emails that I want to follow up on, if the person doesn't reply, which is probably more than half the emails I send, different email software has different features for it, but setting a reminder for that email to come back in my inbox if the person hasn't replied, it's kind of turned into like a mini superpower for like fundraising, sales, just anything like that. So I would say, in my day-to-day, I'm sending like 60, 70 emails a day. I'd say like 40 or 50 of those, I put that little bounce back on, and most people will reply. But if they don't reply, and I set the point in time when it would be, I'd be comfortable following up with that person saying, just checking in on the email I sent. And that's just made like my whole existence so much more efficient.
Oh yeah, I see so many entrepreneurs, I guess professionals, everyone really, if you're judging the quality of your day based on the emails that you're going to get back, and also people who are sending an email, and if someone doesn't reply, they automatically interpret that as a no to their request. When they might be ready to go, there could be a million reasons as to why they haven't responded in a timely manner or responded at all. But if you follow up, it might just be a very, very valuable connection. So that's a really, really good one. What's one thing on your bucket list?
I would love to see the end of factory farming. not even in my lifetime, but much sooner than the end of my lifetime. Yeah, that's the kind of thing that drives me every day, and that's what I would love to see happen.
And final question, what's one thing you do to win the day?
What's one thing I do to win the day? I think connecting in with other like talented, interesting people that have kind of good perspectives on the world and who are out there, motivated with big visions, doing exciting things. I think, surrounding myself with people like that and being connected in with people like that is just massive from an inspirational perspective, and helps in all sorts of different ways.
I love it. So much good stuff in there. Michael, thank you so much for coming on the show. And before we finish, where can people go to learn more about you and Fable and all the other amazing things that you're doing?
Yeah, so our website is Fable Co. Instagram is probably the social media channel that we use the most for Fable. Personally, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or Twitter. Those are probably the best.
Awesome. We'll link to all those in the show notes too. Michael, thank you so much for coming on, and all the best with Fable and everything else you've got happening.
Yeah, thanks so much. Really appreciate it. Awesome catching up with you.
I hope you found that interview as powerful as I did. There's so many actionable steps that Michael spoke about and great lessons in there for all of us, especially in these uncertain times. If you want to be the first to hear about interviews when they go live, remember to hit subscribe. And if you enjoyed this conversation, share it with a friend or a loved one so they can benefit too. Before we go, just a reminder to check out wearepodcast.com. Get 3 days with the most successful podcasters and entrepreneurs on the planet. The world is different now. We know that. What worked last year is not going to work anymore. So if you're serious about wanting a successful future, come along to this event and get the latest strategies, blueprints, and resources from leaders at the absolute top of their game. They won't be holding anything back, and you'll be able to ask as many questions as you like. wearepodcast.com. It will be the best $200 you ever spend, I promise you that. That's all for episode 26. Remember to get out there and win the day. Until next time, onwards and upwards, always.